Next up, we have Gabrielle Shiner-Hill and Jørgen Sevild talking about the world of digitization of fabrics. One of my favorite topics. I actually led a team here in Asia, well, among other things, that digitize fabrics, so this is a subject that's very close to my heart. So I'm excited to hear what you both have to say.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Let's see. Thank you so much, Joshua, and the Alvanon team for having us, and thank you for everyone that has tuned in to today's session. Both Gabby and I are very excited to come here to speak about digital materials, and I think most of us agree that it's difficult, if not even impossible, to make a high-quality finished physical product from poor quality materials. And as we will highlight a bit more of today, the same applies to DPC and digital product creation. So I'm Jørgen Sevild, and I'm with Bandicoot Imaging, the material digitization deep tech company. And with me is also...
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Shiner-Hill, known as Gabby, and I am the co-founder of Bureau 555, a material digitization company working directly with the supply chain. And today we're going to start off with a question. So you can see in front of you, please feel free to scan the QR code to take part and answer the question. So you are looking at two pictures of the same fabric. One is a photograph of a physical fabric, and one is a digital simulation of the same fabric. We'd like to ask you which picture you think is a simulation. Scan the QR code, there's a link in the chat, and this will allow you to take part. So moving on.
So while you're doing that, you might be thinking about also, what does even material digitization mean? And there's different words for what we're going to dig deeper into today, digital twins and data containers and digital fabrics and many more. But today we're going to be speaking specifically about fabric digitization, so the digitization of physical fabrics and turning physical fabrics into digital fabrics. So as already mentioned, just as the quality of the physical product heavily depends on the quality of the physical material, this also applies to DPC, where DPC heavily depends on the quality of the physical material and how these are created. So in the next 20-25 minutes, we're going to be highlighting some of the key things that are important to pay attention to, such as quality and what a digital material is, what it's made of and how it's created, and into how to actually create the digital materials and what type of impact and future we see with this. So we'd love to see any thoughts or questions that you might have in the chat. But before that, I'll hand over to Gabby just to introduce a little bit more of what she does.
Yes, so a little bit about me. So my name is Gabby. I'm based in London. I'm originally a weaver. I studied textile design, and I've worked in the fashion and textile industry, specifically in design and manufacturing, for over 20 years. My early career was spent traveling across the US, training textile mills how to implement CAD systems. And then I moved specifically into design and product development, working for suppliers like Esquel and Dewhurst. And during that time, I built really strong relationships with manufacturers and mills. And I understand their importance within the supply chain. I then spent 5 years in academia running the fashion buying course at Ravensbourne University, London. And there I specialized in sustainability and global sourcing. And since 2016, I've also run my textile and fashion consultancy, Shiner-Hill Design. So, Bureau 555. Nusrat, my co-founder, and I have known each other for over 10 years. And back during the pandemic, after a year of research into digitizing textiles, we founded Bureau 555 in early 2022. We have a team of 10 people across the UK and Bangladesh, and our entire mission is to reduce textile waste within the supply chain. And we do that by helping brands, manufacturers, and mills to create true-to-life digital fabrics. We try to utilize fast digital workflows so that we can reduce the lead times, the costs, and the waste. We call ourselves a material first company, but what does that really mean? It means that we're all textile people first who trained in textiles, and we do strive for excellence within our field. We are using the technology for what it is, a tool to help us work better and more efficiently. And we also understand that people are at the heart of what we do. You know, the supply chain is run by people. Here you can see some images from training and workshops that we've had over the last year. We're also a regional scanning hub for some key brands, and you can see some of the customers we've worked with. And we have a big focus on education and accessibility. We've worked with the V&A, been supported by the British Council, given talks at Dhaka University and other universities in Bangladesh and the UK, and we research as part of UAL, as part of the Fashion, Textiles and Technology Institute. A little bit about our material digitization and the services we offer. So we utilize a varying range of scanning solutions. So we have Visu, we use Bandicoot, we use Epsom, and we do refer to ourselves as tech agnostic because we believe that you should use the right technology to get the best outcome. And over the last 2 years, we've built some key partnerships and we feel like we've built those because we are working directly with the mills and manufacturers in the supply chain. So just quickly, the key services we offer is material digitization. So digital fabrics for use in Clo, Browseware, Optitex, then moving into Blender and Keyshot. Digital material validation, so we can review digital materials and assets against company-defined quality standards. 3D garment creation in Clo, and then also education and industry and academia, almost seen as the most important part of our job, running customized workshops to support the supply chain to navigate the new digital landscape.
Yeah. So I'm Jørgen, and I stumbled into essentially just one of China's largest fabric mills about 10, 11 years ago. And since then, I've worked across the fashion supply chain with focus on technology and process management. And since 2018, I've been specializing in 3D and fabric digitization. Last year, I joined Bandicoot Imaging Sciences, which is just a deep tech company started in 2019 in Sydney, in Australia. By 4 veteran scientists in the field of imaging sciences. And they started with addressing some of the key challenges with material digitization for fashion, such as quality and the scientific accuracy of the materials, the cost and the scalability. And at the core of what Bandicoot's doing is the idea of turning deep scientific breakthroughs into powerful tools that are accessible and available where it's needed. And in this case, where fabric is produced and where it's used. So the conventional approach to capture materials has been to fix cameras and lights in a box. And this has been approached for many decades or decades old and can either be done DIY or then requires deep expertise. But you can also purchase equipment that is sometimes expensive and requires a bit of time to receive and install and then to get trained on. And the industry has been hitting a bit of a bottleneck with material digitization, trying to scale up and standardize using old approaches, and varying quality and time-consuming manual adjustments is just something that we've gotten used to as an industry. And this is where Bandicoot has come in to reduce the approach of rigid equipment down to a flexible handheld solution. And we're utilizing powerful algorithms in the cloud to then process imagery and essentially make the process easier. And as we'll talk a little bit more about, a digital fabric is so much more than just a flat image. It's critical to recreate the accurate appearances of a material so we can use that in DPC. And it requires a bit of an approach to capture and process and store a lot of this information. So as I'll explain very briefly in the next slide here, just how Bandicoot's technology, you can digitize 1 or up to 1,000 fabrics a day with full cost control. Files are immediately available in the cloud, and you can centralize quality standards. So just to give you a quick idea of how this works, in our case, is where you have a physical fabric and you capture the physical fabric's surface area using a camera and a flash. And we have a frame that then sets the area that you'd like to digitize. You take the images from this image process and you upload them directly into a web application so that everything happens with just an internet connection. And these 3D files that are output from this process is then directly output into industry standard file formats and can be then used in software like Clo or Browseware and so forth. Bandicoot solution is currently being used by many of the industry's leading brands and garment vendors and fabric mills, and many of whom I think is in the audience here today. And we're also integrated within a very fast-growing ecosystem of technology partners and service providers such as Bureau and Gabby's work here. So just to get started a little bit more of what's the use of digital fabrics in the world and the fashion world today, is that we primarily see or group them into three uses. We have the metaverse, gaming, AR, VR, extended reality and entertainment and so forth. The marketing and sales and B2B and B2C with e-commerce and exhibitions and showroom. And what we'll be talking specifically about today is specifically around 3D product visualization under digital product creation, virtual fitting, rapid prototyping, and so forth. So just specifically today is more on the DPC field.
So let's talk about quality. So what is a high quality digital fabric? So the elephant in the room is, how do you give people an impression of the hand feel and build the trust? Because we don't have hand feel, we don't have haptic options at this point in time. So really it's about building the trust in that material. We know we're almost at the earliest stages of what is possible. So we're really looking forward to seeing how the technology and hardware is going to jump in the next couple of years. And we're talking today about creating a physical fabric into a digital fabric, so creating a digital twin. So not a digitally native fabric that's created digitally, but a physical fabric into a digital fabric. And when we're defining high quality, we don't just mean resolution, because people think digital, they think resolution. Digital materials have many qualities that can be defined and quality controlled, QC'd, just like your physical materials. And they do have 3 key elements. So the areas we want to talk about is appearance, physics, and master data. So the appearance. These are the texture maps of your material, and they're created through scanning. They're known as PBR maps, and they essentially control how light reflects off of each layer. So for us textile people, the maps represent how the textile looks, the design, the weave pattern, or the knit, the hairiness, the color, all of those visual cues that we have. And this appearance can be captured with scanning. So you could have Visu, you could have Bandicoot, you could have a flatbed scanning solution. But there are also AI solutions which create approximated texture maps. So when thinking about appearance, you're either thinking about capturing that appearance or an approximation. And I think, Jørgen, you're going to jump in here.
Yes, well, just specifically, since appearance is what Bandicoot is currently focusing on, and there's primarily the 2 common methods to capture and recreate the appearance of the material digitally, and is either then the scientific capture method, as you mentioned, where you capture the material's actual accurate appearance, or you can use approximation techniques where you take a single image and then you use this image to guide the approximation process in the next step. And this has different pros and cons of these different methods.
Indeed, indeed. So let's thinking about the physics. The physics is very important. So this is the data that represents how your fabric behaves in a 3D environment, essentially when gravity is applied, how the fabric drapes, how it bends and moves. The physics testing parameters will depend on the 3D system that you're using. So you need to define if you can test that physics data in a lab using recognized textile testing techniques, or do you need to invest in hardware, which is technology specific testing equipment? Or can you work with a service provider? Or the other option, which isn't as exact, but it's still an option, is a visual approximation, where you look at the fabric visually and essentially adjust the physics and the drape using what would basically be sliders within the software of your choice. And then we move to master data. This is all about the data of your fabric. So this could be your composition, yarn count, price, we've listed some here, your supplier, your MOQs, but it's also where you can capture some of that impact assessment, your carbon footprint and certifications. So thinking about impact assessment and traceability data, we all know that digital product passports are coming. France, I think you're first. So digital product creation and traceability needs to be connected. You can embed the data from the beginning, which can give you visibility down the supply chain to the consumer. And if you want to go one step further, you can even validate and verify your data on the blockchain. So for us, these 3 sections, appearance, physics, and master data, are the key elements of a high quality digital fabric.
So now that we talked a little bit more about the building blocks of a digital fabric, we need to talk about how we actually create them. So how do we create a high quality digital fabric? And there's many ways to actually get started with this, as we've already talked about. And we know that the audience here is involved across a wide range of product categories. And we're therefore just going to focus the next round of discussion mostly around the 3 most critical considerations, and that are workflow, expertise, standards, and integration.
Yes, so for workflow, we're thinking about defining your goals and your end use first. Think of it in exactly the same way you produce your garments. You wouldn't produce your jeans in a lingerie factory. Digitizing denim is going to be very different from digitizing your lace. And anyone working across those 2 product categories would definitely agree. So you need to map your existing product categories to understand the different challenges of those materials, their requirements, and then the opportunities that exist within the workflow for each category. So there are 3 really common options for getting started with fabric digitization. The first one is digitizing in-house. So this is a model that brands are using, where fabrics can be sent to head offices or hubs. It is a good place to get started, but essentially it does mean you'll be still shipping fabrics around the world, which is the model that we are trying to move away from. Digitizing at source with a service provider. So at source, meaning in the same country or location where you produce your materials. So Bureau 555 is located in Bangladesh, specifically for scanning at source. Or digitizing directly with your vendors. This is a fantastic option if they are starting to digitize their fabrics, and that is a whole new area for the mills to be working within. So then, when considering your workflow, you also need to think about the interoperability of your digital files. So where are your digital fabrics going to be used, and are they being used for different purposes? So for example, if your digital fabrics are just being used by design and development for range planning, will they then be given to, for example, marketing and taken into Unreal Engine? If that is the case, then how you prepare your digital materials is going to differ, and you might need a different set of data for the onward pieces of software you're going to be using. So making sure you capture the right type and volume of data for the different applications where your digital fabric is going. So just as your supply chain is going to look different for like denim and lingerie, your hardware and software stack may look different too. Different tools are built for different jobs. So when capturing fabric physics, it is critical that you are aware of which 3D CAD system you're going to be using. Jørgen, I think you were going to jump here.
Yes, we have a little bit of, just as an example, and we were thinking about how you said that you wouldn't make your jeans in a lingerie factory. There's a bit of an example with Bandicoot of how important it is to create a dedicated workflow for different type of product categories. Where a few years ago, Bandicoot started building out a digital denim workflow called Indicon, and this is really just because denim fabrics and the workflow around denim is different from other processes with complicated wash and just different steps that you have to go through and requirements for color and accuracy and the type of data that's needed. And so we're now working with key players in the denim industry to capture the type of best practices that's used to improve this workflow. And this is just one example of how we've created a technology and workflow specifically for one product category that we're also doing for other product categories. And this is really also bringing on to, I think, the next point here of expertise. The most important thing that we're realizing is by working this way on how expertise is distributed across the supply chain. And the quickest way to get started is really just to reach out to the kind of companies and the people and companies you work with that have already done this type of work. And there's a network of manufacturers and equipment providers that understand how workflows work on a deep level. And we strongly recommend to any companies getting into this that you reach out to companies in the supply chain for a bit of expertise and support from their side.
So thinking about expertise, this is where we really recommend co-creating with your vendors or vendors co-creating with your brand. The vendors possess a tremendous amount of technical expertise. They may work with several other brands like you and have a deep understanding of some of their best practices. So this is really a great opportunity to speak to your vendors, create partnerships and align your goals. So just as an example that we've seen, I can show a digital twin of a physical textile to a fabric technologist in one of the mills we work with, and they can pick out any repeat or color issues or any faults immediately. They do not need to have been trained or to be trained to create a fabric digitally to know when it is not correct. So this is key. The textile skill level is embedded and inherent in the mills, and the 3D technologies can then be taught. What is much more difficult is to teach a technology specialist all about textiles. You can digitize a material to your heart's content, but if you do not know if it's right or wrong compared to the original fabric, you are essentially wasting your time. Quite often the brands we work with acknowledge that they do not have those textile skills internally. And we talk about the textile's eye. So we hire textile technologists to work digitally rather than graphic designers to create the textiles. Another thing in expertise is education and learning. This really is key because our industry needs a continuous pipeline of technologists that are trained in this area. And what we have found working in Bangladesh is this can only happen if academia, industry, and the technology partners come together. So with our ongoing education and learning, we are doing everything we can to capture these best practices. So this leads us into standards and integration. So what does that mean, Jørgen?
Yes, good question. We know that most companies are already setting quality standards for physical products. So we would like to kind of establish that as a starting point. So set your quality standards in the same way that you'd like to set them for your physical fabrics. And you already have a set of standards that you must adhere to. And it's critical that you define your needs and requirements in a clear way so that the companies that you work with can understand them and follow them as you're working with them.
Yes, so really standards and integration, that they're much more than just defining resolution or file size, texture map requirements. It can be all the way through to like your naming conventions and your file delivery as well. So define your own standards and requirements. Go back to your quality manuals. So technologists, this is your time. Those manuals that you created, they're needed now. Industry standards and requirements. So you will find that you can often benchmark your standards against some industry standards, but the tricky part here is that different softwares often adhere to different standards, or in some cases have no textile standards at all. And that is the challenge that we often find working in this space. Cross-departmental and design to production collaboration. So do not develop digital fabrics that cannot be used across departments, because you'll just find yourself retrofitting or having to go back to the beginning to create those fabrics again. Digital asset management is key. So think about where your digital assets are going to be stored, processed and shared, and make sure that's compatible with your current systems. And a little standards example we have from our work in the last year is, so one of our customers is a mill, a textile mill, and they've created digital twins of their fabrics. And they deliver them to several different brands who all have different digital quality standards regarding quality control, master data, asset management, and where those are delivered into. So when it works really well, that means that when it works really well for the mill, the brand has often given comprehensive training. And they've usually coupled that with a digital ally in the brand who helps guide the mill through that process. This can result in a really successful collaboration to create high quality digital materials. When it doesn't work well is when a request comes through, for example, via email, asking for a digital twin of a material with no other guidance or information. So this really does go back to the co-creation and working with your supply base. Please work with them, do not dictate to them. And this leads us into thinking about the fact that really there is no one size fits all. I'm sorry to say there is no one size fits all. And there's a scope and breadth that you'll be working with of technology and hardware.
Let's see. So now that we talked a little bit more about the quality and how we make high quality digital materials, we talked about how they're made, and we're also wondering, or you might wonder, why are these digital materials important, and what's the future going to be for digital materials? So we're just going to look at a few different perspectives on this, and we've seen 3D technology be used for DPC across many other industries. In some industries, 3D and DPC has been a common for decades, completely outside of fashion. But fashion is complex, and the materials that we work with are rich and varying. And the advanced technology required to bring fluid moving fabrics with the right drape and fit have only recently become available to the masses. And now that it's available, it's happening fast. As these tools are becoming more accessible and available, the benefits to our industry is also rapidly scaling up, and we're seeing that the benefits are becoming more significant to reduce the negative impact that the industry is having on people and the environment that I think we're all so aware of. Some of these benefits to individual businesses are many, and they're proven over and over again by many case studies released by big tech companies in the ecosystem. So we're not going to repeat the same ones, but across the board, we're seeing reduced time, reduced cost, reduced waste, and much more. And you'll need a culture when it comes to people with this that embraces diverse skill sets, as we've already talked about, with expertise both in physical fabrics and also the digital realm. The young workforce around the world is increasingly digital native, and 3D just sits at the center of many other digital experiences that people have all the time. We see traceability and transparency is at the heart of DPC and starts with material digitization. And there's an open opportunity right now for tech-savvy companies to utilize technology to level the playing field by creating and tapping into entirely new business models. So we just want to highlight that in the bigger picture, DPC is an opportunity for us to change the way that we're working, with tremendous benefit both to the organizations and outside.
Yes, thank you, Jørgen. And speaking to the design, development, production, and sales and marketing. So we know that DPC sits in between all of these areas, and the worst thing you can do is push 3D to design and leave it there. It must be implemented from the beginning of the process, from when you are sourcing your materials. So I reiterate, do not just leave under design. You must implement your digital materials from the beginning. If your company is currently using digital product creation, I would like you to look at how it is implemented across these departments. Which department is it sitting in? Has it been integrated into those core business units? And if not, I request that you challenge the workflows within your company, especially if you see that your processes are being done in a completely analog manner and then pushed and retrospectively to be made digital afterwards. So just one of the points to finish on is, if you are going to make a high quality digital product, you need to start with your materials. Data is a big part of the quality consideration, but not just data integrity. So I think yesterday Dinesh from Vital Mechanics said, trash in, trash out. It has to be good, clean data to document the quality of your product. And so moving on to the last slide, we asked you at the beginning which fabric is the photograph and which fabric is the simulation. So having run this before, we do know that respondents generally have a 50% success rate. So 50% of the people answering usually know get it right. But that was not really the point. The point is us actually to highlight the image on the left is a flat photograph, but the simulation on the right is a high quality digital material, which is data rich, and it's composed of appearance, physics, and master data. So we're really interested to see how you answered the poll, and we will release the results on LinkedIn, and so feel free to follow us there to find out how everyone else answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
That was great, Gabby and Jørgen. Really compelling. Again, one of my favorite topics. I mean, like you said, the DPC process, well, the physical process begins with materials oftentimes, and the DPC process needs to start there as well. And standards are absolutely core to that. I can tell anyone who's involved in this that if you don't have standards at the beginning, you will suffer later on. So I'm actually, we have a number of questions. A lot of questions have come through from the audience, but since I'm the host, I get to ask my own question first, but I'll only ask one. And that's probably one of the harder questions you're going to get tonight, which is fleece and faux fur. That was one of our biggest challenges over here. A number of companies, Nike, Patagonia, VF, tons of problems with getting fleece to look right in the digital space, and same with fur. What do you guys have a solution for that? What's your thoughts?
I mean, I can talk on my side about what we have to do when we get them through the door, and we've banned faux fur because no one should be looking at fur in the first place. No, I mean, but on a serious matter, like fleeces, we are okay with. We have solutions for that. But fur, I personally cannot give you a really good solution for digitizing fur. I can hand it over to Jørgen.
Yes, well, I think I can say that out of the box, we don't have I think a great way just for any type of fleece and fur. But I think, again, what I've seen across the last 2 years working with the Bandicoot team, with the R&D and scientists, is that we just have great capacity for taking on challenges. So we have tackled this before. We know that the technology can work really well for it. But again, different materials just have different requirements, and some things really need some deeper R&D. And this is something that we're focusing on, but it's not something that's ready out of the box yet.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, one of the things that I think the industry could really use is some sort of global standard around fuzzy things. I won't call it fur.
I completely agree.
Fuzzy things, and that's one of the biggest things that's lacking right now.
I think especially because every single fiber moves independently of itself, right? So then that is a huge amount of processing power to go into that. But yeah, completely agree.
And even knit materials obviously have there's a lot of fuzzy things out in the world that we need to deal with. Well, great. We have another question from Emily Bowers-Clark. There we go. How can fabric digitization work when working with high stretch fabrics for sportswear, capturing compression, elongation, etc.? Yeah.
So on our side, we can capture the bend and the elongation of the materials. But when it comes to compression, so we can see it, for example, for the elongation. But when it comes to compression, again, that's down to fit within the 3D software. So if we can put the data in for the physics behind it for its stretch and recovery, and maybe it's a 4-way stretch and what's happening there. But how that data is read depends on the 3D software for using for the fit at that point. So that's when there needs to be more communications between the technology companies and thinking about the physics interoperability, for sure, in that area.
Great. Well, I think we only had time for 2 questions. I think this is a subject that we could, again, there was probably 5 or 6 questions, really good ones, honestly, in the chat. And I think we'll go ahead and send those to you, and hopefully we can get back to some of those folks and maybe even include them in some of the breaks. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the chat, Gabby and Jørgen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you.
Great.